about results because like Tavis talked about in his presentation previously, he wants to find bugs. That's the end result. He's not trying to write a thesis. We're not trying to write a thesis either. We're here to secure the application, and for us, part of that is finding bugs. So we have found a lot of bugs using this system. So if you look at Office 2000 RTM, we found around 1,800 bugs. Then you can look at the service packs. We found a little bit fewer in Office 12 or Office 2007, SP1 and SP2 were around 250 bugs in each of those service packs. And then Office 2010 for RTM, we're still taking fixes. That product's not shipped, but you can see that the count is quite high. We're over 1,600 fuzzing fixes today. So you might look at that number and say, wow, there's a lot of security problems. So there certainly are some problems, but there's some stuff going on behind these numbers. So we're very aggressive at fixing issues. So we don't spend time trying to figure out if these are exploitable or not. We just go and fix that issue. And if you just fix it, you don't have to worry about if it's exploitable or not, right? It's not going to crash anymore. One of the other things that we do is we just fix things even when we know they're not security problems. So if we see things like a pointer is initialized to null or a variable is initialized to null, and then we try to use that, it's just a null deref, and that's not a security concern, but it's a robustness problem. So we'll just go fix that. But we're finding bugs like that through fuzzing. So our next layer of defense is to reduce the attack surface. And we have two key pieces that we do with this. And the first is file block, the next is Gatekeeper. File block is the ability, we open many files, as you might have guessed from our 300 file formats. And many organizations don't actually need to open all of those file formats. So you might say, my organization doesn't need to open this very old version of a Word document. We don't use that internally. We don't expect anybody to send us documents like that. And if they do, I don't want the parser to kick in on that. So we have the ability, either through the registry or through group policy, to say, I don't want to open these files at all, or if they do come, they'll be opened in something called protected view, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The next piece we have is Gatekeeper. So we wrote the file format. We also wrote these documents that specify how the file format works recently and published those out to MSDN. So we know what a file should look like. Sometimes files coming in do not play by those rules. A lot of times attacks do not play by the rules when the file comes in. So we created something called Gatekeeper, and it runs automatically on open, and what it does is it has a set of rules and it checks that file out, and it says, it returns to the caller a Boolean value. Either this one succeeds and it plays by the rules, or no, it doesn't. And so what this does is it allows a couple things. One is it allows us to easily protect against unknown exploits, because we're not trying to put a rule in and say, oh, there was this MSRC case and let's fix this one problem. It's an overall integrity check of this is a correctly formatted file. And then if there are some problems, the way this technology works is we have an XML file that describes what our file format should look like. And that XML file is used to generate C++, and that C++ turns into a DLL that does not need to be localized, and that DLL is the one that makes the decision. So if there is a problem where there's like a zero-day attack or something like that, we hope that we can quickly tweak the rules to find that and quickly issue that DLL update. So we took all of the file attachments for the MSRC cases against Office since January 1st, 2007, and we said which ones are blocked by Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper will not be able to detect all types of attacks, but it turns out that it's very effective against the attacks that we've seen so far. So in PowerPoint case, we actually will detect and reject every single one of the MSRC cases that came in after January 1st, 2007. Word and Excel also pretty good. The worst case scenario is Excel, and that's 82%, and I think that's something to be really happy about if you can block 82% of the unknown attacks. So the next piece I want to talk about is what do we do, how do we mitigate some exploits? And that's what I referenced a little bit before in something called the Office Protected Viewer. And so what we've done is we have a sandbox version of Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So there are different scenarios that will lead you into this sandbox. For example, if you open a file that fails the Gatekeeper, depending on what your policy is set to, you can either outright reject and say, I'm not going to open these files at all, or the second option is to allow them to open, but only open in the sandbox. We can say some things like, I talked about file block. One option is, again, to outright block that file. Another one is to say, I'm not going to let that open in the full version of Office. I'm going to make it go into the sandbox. We have this idea of unsafe folders. So if something is in the TIFF, it probably came from some internet application. The temporary internet files directory is the TIFF. And if it's there, then it probably came from some internet location. And so we'll open that in protected view. All Outlook attachments and anything that comes from the internet zone will also be forced to go into protected view. So how does this protected view work? Well, we have two instances of the application. We have a host process and a client process. That host process runs with full privilege to the system, and it owns the ribbon and the outer parts of the UI. We have a second process, which is the client process. It runs with restrictions. It's running in a sandbox, and it does the riskier things like parsing the document. So if you were to look at Office, up here is the host process. That's the one that's running with full privileges. And then down here, that's the client process. The client can communicate to the host through name pipe messages. So the core components of the sandbox are using restricted token, which first came out in Windows 2000, core Windows piece, the job object, which allows you to do some restrictions, and user interface privilege isolation, first available in Vista. So the net impact of the sandbox is you should only be able to write to places that you are explicitly ACLed to do that. And that's the sandbox being ACLed to do that. And you can read from places that allow everyone to read. So at the end of the day, you should not see scenarios where you receive a malicious document, open it in protected view, and it be able to own your entire system and drop a rootkit. So the key benefit here is we're not fixing bugs because we have this protected view. This is a last line of defense. We certainly do things like have NX, ASLR, GS, and all of these other defenses in place, but this is an additional layer that allows us to do that. And then if there are some false positives in Gatekeeper, we have some way that the user could open it and not just say, yeah, sorry, you're not going to ever see that file again. And then the last piece we have here is we want it to improve the user experience, and we want people to have good information when making trust decisions, and we want to avoid the user from having to make a decision between being productive and being secure. And certainly there are some areas for improvement with that. So before, you used to see a lot of prompts, and we'll show a few different scenarios that are different in a little bit. So we think that this is a very common experience in Office. You have an email attachment that comes in. Today we'll do Gatekeeper validation on it. And then depending on what the results of that are, you can be blocked outright if the Gatekeeper fails, and that's what you've chosen your policy to be. Or then we'll go into the sandbox viewer if everything checks out, because this is an email attachment. If the user clicks enable, first of all, we feel that a lot of times you receive an email attachment and you just need to look at it. You don't need to proceed any further. You don't need to edit that document. And so your experience is sandboxed in that world. If you do need to do some editing, you click edit or enable, and then you're in edit mode, and this becomes like your document. You're now moving into the full version of Office, and you can save that document and do additional things. If you made any trust decisions, like that had macros, and you decided that I need to enable macros, we'll not prompt you again when you reopen that file about macros. So then I have a few additional demos. So the first one is MSRC case, the same one that the Gatekeeper failed on. So this is the more end-to-end user scenario where you get this PowerPoint attachment. And so this is actually the MSRC repro file that we received. And up here you see that there's this red bar saying that you failed the gatekeeper. You're in protected